welcome to Sport Vibes on DNT Walk. This is that channel where you get to catch up with some of the very latest updates across the world of sports, while we also pride ourselves in taking it a step further to not just serve you the stories, but to also bring lessons, life lessons, applicable life lessons from these stories coming up from the world of sports. My name is Bolaji Alimi, the Sport Pilot, and I will have the privilege of being your host yet again. So stay tuned and get set for this wonderful ride. Welcome back to Sport Vibes on DNT Walk. A brief recap of what we've been talking about in the last 2 weeks or thereabouts. We've talked about several things, and we would mention that as a previous knowledge to lay foundation for what we are here to discuss this week. We did mention the fact that Eden Hazard, a very great player, still a great player till now, did ply his trade at Chelsea in England before moving to Real Madrid and several clubs before that. Played in Belgium, played at Lille in France, and of course had a very glorious time doing all these things across these countries. But Chelsea definitely was his prime. But at some point, Eden Hazard felt the need to move on from Chelsea, felt there should be a greener pasture somewhere, and that destination was Real Madrid. But as many of us have found out by now, it hasn't been so far. Maybe a lot can still happen, you never can say never in football, but till now, it hasn't really lived up to his own expectation and the expectation of many football fans, considering the caliber of player Eden Hazard was moving to Real Madrid. And so we took a lesson from that sometimes the grass is not always greener the other side. Sometimes you just need to wait, regardless of the fact that you feel it's time to progress with something you're pursuing. It's time to leave what you're doing presently for something better. But one of the major highlights of that is that Chelsea as a football club has moved on from Eden Hazard to do even greater exploits since he left, winning the Champions League among several other trophies. And so we mentioned the truth that many times in life, no matter how valued or how valuable things are to us, when they leave, maybe beyond our own control, when things leave us, no matter how much we would love to cling to them, we just have to move on because God has substitute for everything. And many times when we trust on God to restore us, He does that in double fold and in many ways beyond our expectation. So we choose to leave the past behind us and focus on what is ahead. So we took time to do a brief recap of the last 2 weeks so that we can have the right basis to talk about our discussion this week, and that will be centering on the international break. Of course, in the world of football, it's been a few days of break from the normal club football many people have been exposed to in the last 2 months or thereabouts. This time around, nations are welcoming their superstars back home to do themselves and the nation proud on the international scene, whether for friendly matches, for certain competitions within their sphere, and several other things. So we'll be focusing on a very great nation in football, the defending world champions, France. So France as a national team are the defending champion, not just on the world scene in terms of the UEFA Nations League, which is a competition still ongoing right now. Of course, that will take a break for the World Cup to come in next time, but right now the UEFA Nations League is still on board. And to go straight to the point, knowing the pedigree France has as a footballing nation and their recent exploits, of course they had that disappointing outing at the 2021 Euros, the Euro 2020 that was played in the year 2021. It was disappointing for them to lose to Switzerland at the round of 16. Nonetheless, they put that disappointment behind them last year in October to defeat Spain at San Siro in the final of the UEFA Nations League. So it made sense for a lot of people to think this time around being drawn against teams like Croatia, Denmark and Austria would mean that France would comfortably top the group. Of course, you'd mentioned that in football, you should never say that, but at the same time, there are some things you can easily infer in your mind. Croatia, not a mean team. This was the team France defeated. They were losing finalists in the 2018 World Cup in Russia, so you don't want to say they are small teams. But regardless of the recent upturn in form or status of every other team pitted against France in Group A1 in the UEFA Nations League, many people still believe that France would have a seemingly enjoyable ride coasting home and just topping the group comfortably. But so far, as you might have seen, they were only able to escape relegation at the last ditch ensuring they defeated Austria in one of their games, but then losing against Denmark So these are shown definitely that as much as possible, let's take one lesson from that before we move on. As much as possible, we must not despise anyone. Yes, this is a very, very popular story we learn that sports teaches us time and again that regardless of your pedigree, your status, and how seemingly low the standard of your opponent is before you face them, you should never underestimate what they can do when the match begins or when the competition itself begins. So France, of course, since last year when they won that final against Spain at San Siro in the UEFA Nations League, they've had their fair share of problems, but in spite of all these problems, they still managed to comfortably qualify for the World Cup in Qatar, and en route to that, they even defeated Kazakhstan 8 goals to 0. So it's not like this team has gone totally bad, but they seem to be having their own struggles within themselves. But totally, our focus is not just on France for the sake of pointing out criticisms, but that we ourselves, many times when we face life, when we face challenges ahead of us, sometimes if it's in form of competition, there's every tendency we want to look down on ourselves in comparison to others that may be in the same race with us, and we should never do that. There is something great God has deposited in every man, which if you partner with him enough to fan it up to flames, you'd be surprised yourself what you get. So in this world, for someone who is going to succeed, who is going to go very far in life, in family, in business, in whatever sphere of influence, in whatever area, inferiority complex is something that must not be allowed. You must not despise yourself, because a lot of what will happen to you hinges on you. Even your willingness to partner with God or invite this supreme being to help you depends on you. And for your information, we should mention the fact that this is not just happening out of the blues. When you're talking about nations that are expected to be the giants going into a World Cup year, seemingly stumbling, we've seen this again and again. In the year 1998, France themselves hosted the World Cup on home soil and eventually won the World Cup. But come Korea-Japan 2002, France did not even go beyond the group stage. We want to talk about the fact that Brazil were winners in that same year, 2002, but did not go beyond the quarterfinal stage in the year 2006 in Germany. And then Italy were champions in 2006 in Germany. They were also very woeful in the 2010 edition at South Africa. They did not make it past the group stage as well. Spain were champions in 2010. They did not go beyond the group stage in 2014 in Brazil, and on and on and on, because Germany also, who were winners in 2014, did not make it past the group stage in the year 2018. So we're saying all this because it's looking like a writing on the wall for teams that are defending champions or the giants from previous World Cup year to perform woefully in the subsequent ones. But of course, as much as possible, we are not prophets of doom to the nation of France. We're just saying that these things are seemingly fitting together again, and as sport lovers, as people that love sport from a neutral perspective, we owe it to ourselves to explain these things so that we can make a sense out of some of these struggles. Maybe it's born out of the unneeded pressure to just overdo yourself after doing something great, after achieving a very great feat like winning the World Cup. There are several explanations many people could give to that, but our own point is the fact that you should always forget about things that are behind you in terms of success and look forward to those that are before you. And you should always press towards a very, very high standard, a mark that is beyond what you've achieved in the past. Because many people have said, and it seems true, that the greatest enemy to the success you should achieve in the future is the past one. So this is a call for us to go beyond our limits, go beyond whatever standard, no matter how high they've been, we've set for ourselves, and keep pressing, because as much as we allow God to partner with us in bringing out the great potential He has deposited in us, there is so much more we can do for ourselves and for His sake. And that's how far we'll go on Sport Vibes this week. Until next time, don't forget not to despise yourself and stretch beyond the limits you might have set for yourself before now. See you next time. Thank you so much for watching Sport Vibes on DNT Work. If you enjoyed the video, ensure you subscribe, like, and share the video. Thank you.